You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hello, delicious friends, and welcome to Who Did What Now, the history podcast that's not your history class, with me, your host, Katie Charlwood, history harlot and reader of books. You may be thinking, wow, your voice sounds different today. I'm getting over bronchitis, which is why I sound like this. So you're just going to have to suffer with me sounding a wee bit husky. Like, husky would have been better for last week when I was discussing the dogs, the huskies, the malamutes. I know how to pronounce words. No, I don't. I really don't. Because most of the words I learned by reading. So yeah, it's been a fun week to talk about my accent, actually. Because if anybody saw my socials, it was very funny. Because I got this message through the contact me section of my website. Not even through an email, but through a contact me section on the website. So this person heard my ad on another podcast they listened to, then looked me up, went to my website, filled out all the wee details in the contact me, and then sent me an email talking about how they think my voice is fake and how they were never going to listen to my podcast anyway and how my voice is off-putting. like, thanks, buddy. You had no reason to send me that, Denise. Her name was Denise. It doesn't matter because nobody's going to know who that is because I'm not saying the surname. But Denise. Like, what is this? And then I had really random men message me being like, "You're a fraud. Katie is a phony." And I was like, all right, cool. They're on to me, lads. They're going to know that I'm not actually a person. I'm secretly 3 possums in a coat. Which then someone drew. It is my favourite thing ever. I want to get it framed because that's fantastic. It's just 3 possums in a coat. And I don't know what they're trying to do, but I hope they do it. And I am just back. I'm literally just back in the house after the Glasgow show. So I went over to the show, came back, landed in half an hour ago, and I am at the kitchen table recording because I'm doing my best to try and keep up right now. And I don't know if my voice is going to get worse again. So I thought, you know what? We'll just do what we can now. But this event, this time, has made me consider to maybe fly out the day before next time. Because I almost missed the show. I had to push it by half an hour to an hour to start. Because I flew down and I was getting a flight out from Dublin to Glasgow. And my flight ended up being delayed by 2 hours because somebody died on the runway. Which, as an excuse, fairly good one, to be honest. It's a fairly good excuse, but that's what happened. And oh my goodness, I have news, actually. A completely different thing. I have news. So the British Podcast Awards are on, and I thought, this'll be fun. I'll just apply. I'm a dual citizen. Fuck it. And so now the listener's choice is up. I'll put it in the link down below. But it would be so fun. I think we have the opportunity to do something very, very funny. Because you don't have to be in Britain. You just need an email address and you just have to confirm it, right? So I think it'd be very funny to at least chart on the listener's choice because the amount of big names I'll be up against is massive. And I think it'd be so funny to just be like, hi. And just beat people. But that's just me. But I know what you're thinking. Quit your jibber jabber and fact me. And fact you I will. But first, we've got to get our source on. Our sources are Queers in History, the comprehensive encyclopedia of historical gays, lesbians, bisexuals and transgenders, by Keith Stern. Never at Rest, a biography of Isaac Newton, by Richard S. Westphal. The Forgotten Genius, by Stephen Inwood. Memoirs of the Life, Writings and Discoveries of Sir Isaac Newton, by David Brewster. And of course, we have our old friends, biography.com, smithsonian.com, and history.com. Are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then let's begin. So it is Pride Month right now, and I thought, why not specifically focus on LGBTQIA? Now, I know I'm always talking about historical bisexuals, mainly because they're very easy to find. But I thought, no, let's try and shift some focus and sort of hit the other parts of the rainbow. And I really struggled to find really interesting sort of asexual people from history. Because I was like, I want to talk about somebody ace. I just felt like it was going to be a really good idea. And the difficulty is people either wouldn't really notice at the time, depending on sort of religion, region, it may or may not have, the flags might not be flying, if you know what I'm saying. And because certain things are more outward and easier to spot, like if somebody's gay, lesbian, transgender, they're easy to see. But asexuality, bit more difficult to spot. But I am absolutely convinced that Isaac Newton was asexual. And that man is an absolute weirdo, but also very interesting, right? I think the weirdness has nothing to do with asexuality. I think you could be heterosexual and also be really weird, You can be aromantic and be happy as a clam. You can be fine and fun and wonderful, right? But doesn't matter. This Isaac Newton specifically is a bit wonky out there. I'm just saying. And I think that's what makes it so fabulous, because you think, apple from a tree, it's really boring. He's actually really interesting, and he did a bunch of weird shit, and I hope you're ready for the coolest asexual I could find in history, because we're going to get to it. So let's start at the beginning, shall we? Even the start of this is kind of complicated because it depends on the calendar. So, depending on which calendar you're using, Isaac Newton was either born on Christmas Day, 1642, or he was born on January 4th, 1643. Either of those, pick one, doesn't really matter, because let's just go with Christmas Day, because I think it sounds more fun. So Isaac Newton, he's born, as many people are, but he's born 3 months premature, which is shocking that he survived at this point, because he's a preemie baby, and he was the size of a quart mug. So, you could fit him in a mug to drink him. He was teeny weeny. A lot of preemie babies are. And you think that's a difficult way to enter the world. It gets worse, because his father, a yeoman also named Isaac Newton, actually passed away 3 months before his birth. So, Florence, his mum, she would have only been 3 months pregnant by the time her husband dies, and then she's got this to deal with. I mean, it's not an easy start. But yeah, he is born in Woolsthorpe, and that's in Lincolnshire, England. Now, Isaac spends the first couple of years, and I mean that literally, with his mother, Florence, until she remarries. So she gets married to the minister, Barnabas Smith, and he's a well-to-do gentleman, and, this is farming area, so she's moving up in the world. Now, there is a stipulation that in order for this, marriage to go ahead, is that she goes with Barnabas, and Isaac stays behind. And this is really common at the time, so it's a very, double standard when it comes to widows, widowers, and children. So if you're a widower, if you're a man whose wife has died, probably from childbirth, because, that's usually how they went, you would marry someone else with the purpose of caring for your children. That would be a thing. But if you're a widow and you have children, you're kind of expected to just leave them behind and go start afresh, especially if you're, and I hate to say this, fertile, and it's such a thing. Like, there are some blended families which just exist quite well, and then you get shit like this, which is just shitty. I don't care what the rules of society says, this is bullshit, right? But it's not too bad, because Isaac does grow up in the care of his maternal grandmother. So he stays with her while his mum saunters off to the next village to raise a son and 2 daughters. And he basically doesn't see his mum for like 9 years until Barnabas Smith croaks it, but the damage is done at that point. But yeah, he's being raised by his maternal grandmother, so his mum's mum. And, you know, his father was a yeoman, so like there's farm, and they keep trying to make him become a farmer. And Isaac Newton does not want to be a farmer. And so he goes to like school and they're educating him, and then they keep trying to pull him away from education to make him go work on a farm, and he's like, no. Like at 12 years old, they're trying to convince this fella to run an estate. Florence is like, my husband's dead, you should run our shit. And he's so bad at it. Like, he can't manage shit. He's supposed to be like watching cattle, and he's like, no. And he ends up just reading books under trees and stuff. Like, I could do that, or I could go read. And eventually they're like, okay, this is not working. And so he ends up going back to grammar school. They're like, let's just send him back to school because he is not doing well here. And he goes back to Grantham, after which he goes to university and he attends Trinity College at Cambridge. So like the University of Cambridge and like the University of Oxford, they actually have like different colleges within the university. Like they're not just like, it's not just Oxford, it's not just Cambridge. You've got these wee ones inside it, and that's what makes up sort of these unis, and that's why you can go and do so many things there, right? So yeah, I meant to mention, this is my favourite thing about Isaac Newton, is he makes a working mill. So like he builds models and stuff, and he does this working like flour mill. It's like tiny, and it's got this wheel that he puts a mouse on, and the mouse runs on the wheel, and he makes it like that. That's what he's doing. Don't leave him with the cows. Like, Isaac is not for the cows. No. So he goes to university, and he is a less than stellar student. Like, he wasn't really taught much arithmetic, actually, and he had better Latin and things like that. And when he goes to school, uni for the first time, they're like, he's fine. Like, he's not a great student by any stretch of the imagination. And he's doing his studies and, plodding along. And he starts getting into, and I shit you not, alchemy. Like, turning, like, shit into gold. Like, he gets really into this. Like, he tries to get into the scientific aspect of it, and he's just so involved in it. And he also starts getting into, like, Descartes and Aristotle and Galileo and Copernicus and Kepler and all that jazz, because the scientific revolution has already begun, and he's really sort of reaping the rewards of that a wee bit. And he's sort of connecting sort of philosophy and religion with sort of science, because of course you're very religious back then, and all these things are interconnecting. And all the while not looking at one girl or boy, just not a person, liked the stuff, didn't like the people. And the thing is as well, he's older than a lot of the people that are there in his years, because his education was split, because they were trying to get him to do the farmy things, and he was not for doing the farmy things. They just weren't his cup of tea, And so he's doing okay, and then 1665, the plague happens. Like, the plague. The bubonic plague. And so everything is shut down, schools are shut down, and he has to head back home and quarantine. I mean, I wouldn't know what that's like. But he actually uses this time, and this is where he's actually the most productive. Like, a lot of the theories and the thought processes and, like, the concept of calculus and gravity and all that jazz, this happens not when he's at university, but when he's at home. And he just starts looking into more things, probably because he wants to avoid being near the cows. Like, I get it. He doesn't want to do the farm work, and he has so many other things he's interested in. And, like, he gets really into eyes, and if you have any squeamishness, I'm going to tell you to fast forward like a minute and a half, because I'm about to talk about eyes. So he has this theory about optics, and he wants to know how light goes into the eye and how it affects it and stuff. And what he does by doing this is he tests it on himself. And by testing it on himself, I mean he takes a blunt needle and pokes his eye with it to see how it affects his vision, right? He'll like put it like underneath the eye and wobble it up a little bit, and he'll like wiggle it around. He'll put it in different positions. Like, he's sticking things in his eyes. I don't care how blunt it is. That's not good for you. That's unhygienic at best, right? Like, that's going to fuck shit up. But that's what he's doing, because he's testing, like, eyes. Like, I don't care who you are. Don't stick things in your eyes, okay? Unless they're contact lenses. And even then, make sure you've been taught properly, okay? Just, ugh. And he continues this stuff for 2 years. So 2 years, he's in lockdown. He can't do anything but work and create. And so he ends up coming up with the concept of gravity. The apple fell. Yeah, but no. It's not as simple and easy as that. Did an apple fall? Probably. He's in the fucking countryside. I'd be surprised if apples weren't falling from the trees. But yeah, like, this time away from the university, I'm saying, like, if you find schooling works for you, and I really wish that it did, and I hope it works for a lot of people now that we know the different ways in which people can learn information and take it in. And I think if we're utilising that properly, then I think school becomes more of an option of enlightenment as opposed to just an avenue to the job market. Because, like, that's one of those things, isn't it? Like, if you're rich, if you have money, then education is about raising consciousness. It's about the joy of learning, right? It's about enrichment, right? But if you're poor or just of a lower class, then your education, the purpose of it is to ensure that you have a viable route to the job market. And that's what that is. Like, it's not about any of the social enrichment or stuff you can have otherwise, but like, that's society. Ooh. But yeah, these 2 years he is studying, he's doing his theories, and so he has the concept of gravity. I say the concept, like, gravity existed. It's not like he didn't invent gravity. He just sort of decoded it. And it's only like this, like, teeny weeny part of what he did and his, like, contribution to the scientific world. I mean, the alchemy stuff, weird, nonsense, a bit silly. But, like, he effectively creates calculus. And so he develops, like, differentiation and integration techniques, sort of the fundamentals to, like, maths and science. Like, he sort of puts this together. And not only that, right, because he was studying, like, optics and he had this consideration of light, like, I'm not saying, like, he invented the rainbow, but he's the reason that we understand prisms. So, kind of, which is also why he's really appropriate to talk about at the start of Pride. Like, my man Isaac, he's here for his prisms. So, like, people didn't understand light. They didn't realise that white light was a combination of all the other colours, like, together. So there was a misunderstanding of what caused the rainbow. And this meant that the telescopes weren't quite right? So the lenses that they were making, they didn't quite do what they were supposed to do. Enter Isaac Newton. So he ends up designing a telescope that used mirrors instead of, like, just glass lenses, which allowed effectively the telescope to focus all the colours on a single point, meaning that the images would be clearer, more accurate. And so reflecting telescopes, including, by the way, the Hubble Space Telescope, they're all based off this original concept. Now, it's not just gravity that Isaac Newton was super into, but also he develops 3 laws of motion. And I know these because I saw it in an episode of Blaze and the Monster Machines, because I didn't know what inertia was until I watched that children's television show. So these are Newton's laws of inertia, acceleration, and action and reaction. So inertia basically means that an object will be at rest, it will be still, or it will just continue going forward in a straight line, unless something else makes it go differently, right? Like a football, right? Football sitting on the ground, it's not going anywhere unless you kick it. Inertia. We've got acceleration, which gives us the force equals mass times acceleration, F equals ma formula. Then, of course, we have the third law, which is every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And Isaac Newton, he takes all these formulas, and he publishes his findings in the Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, the mathematical principles of natural philosophy, which is basically known as Principia. We shorten it, guys, it's fine. And that was published in 1687. And this basically puts his mark on the world, which I think still should be the fact that he invented the cat flap. I shit you not. The cat flap. Isaac Newton. Listen, man was practical. I'm just saying. So because of this, he becomes really well known, not the cat flap, but because of the Principia. And it is going very, very well for him. Now, unfortunately, his personal life isn't, because people don't quite like him. They think he's sort of unpleasant. He does have some friends and he does have some colleagues, but he does not have a vast social circle. So it was when he was working in Cambridge that he actually published Principia, because he'd gone back after the plague after his 2 years hiatus and just continued his schooling, and then he did very well and, of course, invented the cat flap. So he ends up staying in the universities up until 1696. He's a mathematics professor, all this kind of stuff. But he's there, and he's quite popular, you see. So when Principia was published, Isaac Newton gets a wee bit of fame, he gets a wee bit more influence, and he uses this to stop King James II from bringing in Catholic teachings into university. He tries to focus it, Catholicism, wow. And Isaac Newton's no, we're not doing that. He ends up being elected to represent Cambridge in this sort of anti-Catholicizing situation and arrange the settlement. And he's done. He's not really enjoying being at Cambridge anymore. He doesn't like being in London either. He thinks it's too busy. For someone who was always trying to be on top, he really doesn't like that much attention, because he's out sabotaging rivals, because of course he is, and just fighting everybody all the time. He's so tempestuous, right? Isaac Newton is pals with John Locke and Samuel Pepys, and he just starts writing aggressive letters to them. And it's just accusing them of shit. It's wild. He's just an angry man. His pal, one of his pals, because he has some of them, they try and set him up with a woman, and he just goes ballistic. He has a total meltdown. They talk about it he had a breakdown, but he just removed himself from the situation and didn't want to deal with that. He's I don't want to be near ladies. No. Leave me with my calculus and other such things. He didn't want to do that. But yeah, that was an interesting one. But yeah, with the Principia doing so well, he's got a lot of attention he doesn't want, and he's in a job he's not really feeling. And so he decides to start a new one, which I will tell you about right after this commercial break. we're back. So because John Locke had tried to set Isaac Newton up with a woman to find him a decent wife, like Isaac just wasn't having it, wrote him a letter, was like, I ain't dealing with you anymore. And he got really mad at Samuel Pepys. And he ends up having this sort of breakdown. And Charles Montague, who later becomes Lord Halifax, he's like a rising politician at the time. He's like, maybe you need to go to London to rest. Like, just sort yourself out, get yourself a new position. And because he's so well known from Principia, he ends up getting a job that will last him the next 30 years. And that's Warden of the Royal Mint. And it is an interesting one. And at this point, William and Mary are ruling because the Glorious Revolution has happened, James II is out, and William and Mary are in. No, I'm wrong. They're ruling till 1694, which means it's 1695 now, which means it's Queen Anne, because William and Mary are joint rulers. So as soon as Mary died, William no longer could hold that title. It was basically a deal they had. So they would be rulers, joint rulers, as long as Mary was there. Now, they didn't have any surviving children, and so the next in line was her sister, Anne. So Queen Anne is ruling at this point, and that's your historical context. And he's there working at the Mint. So there's a couple reasons specifically why he is Warden of the Mint. Like, that's the position he gets. And it's because it's a patronage, really. So it's a job you can do without really having to do it. You're just kind of there. It's more of a symbolic title situation. I mean, you show up, but like, you're just kind of doing it, you know? And with his previous health concerns, they're like, it's a nice stress-free job for you, Isaac Newton. Don't worry about it. And the second part is, this is Isaac Newton. He is famous. He's got Principia out. He's well known. He's seen as a great man. And so if you've got a great man in that position, it makes your government, it makes your ruling look good. Like, it's like having your diversity higher. It makes you look good, you know? So that's what that has. And so he ends up getting this job as Warden of the Mint. And his job really is to look after the buildings of the Mint. And at the Mint at this point was in the Tower of London, which is not at all ominous in any way whatsoever. But this is Isaac Newton, and if he's going to do a job, he's going to do a job right. So he's sort of noticing bits that are happening, and one of the first things he picks up on is that the carpenters aren't charging the Mint the right amount of money. And he's like, wait a minute, this math ain't mathin', and I should know because I math, you know? And so this is one of the things he's noticing. And so like, he's the only magistrate for the Mint. He's the only person that can charge people with doing shit with the money. So counterfeiters, thefts, all that things, like, that's like, he's got that power. And so he starts noticing things and he realizes stuff isn't adding up. And this is before paper money, because like literally everything's in coin form, and you've got a silver standard. So now we have the gold standard, but back then everything was by the silver standard, and was for many, many years. And that is why, delicious friends, that in the Wizard of Oz books, that's why Dorothy's shoes are originally made of silver, and they're not made of like rubies. They're not ruby slippers. That was made by MGM because it looked good on camera in Technicolor. But yeah, the shoes in the book are silver, and that is why, because it's based on the silver standard. And like, there's all these little links that Baum does in the books. But yeah, fun fact, there you go. Many literacy? No, that's wrong somehow. Wait, I don't know. Literary lesson. It's very hard to do with this throat right now. There's a literary lesson in the middle of this, and it's me going, the silver standard is the Wizard of Oz, and Alice in Wonderland is about math. So yay. But anyway, back to Newton. And the coin of the realm, which was, coins in the realm. Silver coins, to be exact. So when you were paying taxes, when you were paying bills, when you were paying with money, like gold coins existed, but for the most part, you were paying with silver coins. Now, unfortunately, England had buggered this up a wee bit when it came to making currency because they made it wrong. Because, there's a silver standard for a reason, because you could use silver in sort of Italy or Portugal or England. You could use it everywhere. That's the point. You would just melt it down or change the coinage, because it's metal, But what had happened in the mint is when they were making silver coins, they had weights that were too heavy. So they were making the coins with too much silver. So if you had a shilling or a halfpenny or whatever, there would be double the amount of silver, in that coin. So a halfpenny could have a penny worth of silver in it. So you could have, a £2 worth of silver in a pound. You would have too much because there was too much silver in it. So counterfeiters who were paying attention, people who were spending a lot of time physically handling money or who dealt with weights, anything like that, it didn't take them too long to realise that, I could take this coin, take it over to Paris or Copenhagen or, wherever, melt it down and then get double what it's worth. So it meant that a lot of the coins then as well wouldn't be staying in circulation. So the coins that should be going around the country, England was physically losing money, not even metaphorically losing money. Money was just leaving the shores because they were smelting it down, right? And making other coins and making more money from it. So because they'd used too much silver initially, they'd already lost money. And now these people are selling it back, and so they're just losing more money because they're taking the silver away. But that's not the only problem with the silver coins. So some of the coins, the older ones, the way they had been made, they were quite soft. So you could just snip a bit off and then smooth it down and then put that back into circulation. So some coins would just be getting thinner and thinner and thinner because they would just be taking bits off them because they were so malleable and easy to do. That's where the whole thing of they'd bite a coin comes from to check if it's real. Because it just depends on the quality of what's in it, But yeah, things are not going well for the bank. Therefore, by the time you're in the 1690s, when Isaac Newton shows up, things are not great. And you've got half the currency that is double its face value, and then you've got another half which is less than its face value. You've already got this physical money situation going on, that on top of that, England is also at war. And it's in a war that it can't afford to pay. There's so much happening. I mean, I know this sounds like history repeating because it fucking is. There's another war going on. It can't afford to do it, and yet keeps doing it. I know. You'd think the ghost of Henry VIII came up and was like, let's fight some French. Because of course it is. It's always the fucking French, isn't it? Just a whole thing. Henry VIII did have a dick measuring contest with the King of France. Chill out, lads. You need to get over it because it's such a thing. So yeah, the coins are bollocksed up and they're in a war they can't afford. And so in enters Isaac Newton in the middle of this, and he is like, what the absolute bullshit is this nonsense going on? And so he comes into it, and you've had a few people that have been trying to do financial wiggling. They're trying to massage stuff down to make it easier. They're trying to deal with government debt. They're trying to organize different types of borrowing. They're trying to figure this out. Again, I've never seen this before. What? We need some modern problems, lads. Modern problems, not ye old 17th century problems. I'm just saying. So Newton comes in and he comes in like right when they're deciding we're going to take the coins back and we're going to remelt them and we're going to remake some coins. Like they want to come in and remint them, like just start afresh, everything's going to be fine and dandy. Luckily, they have this guy show up. So because Isaac Newton's a scientist, he is measuring stuff out, he's making sure everything is perfect, and he ensures that the new coins are minted correctly. But not only is he making sure they're minted right, like weight-wise, is he's using chemistry and alchemy to sort of figure out like the right like proportion of metals is being used. Like he is bringing in all the science to do this. But then he has to figure out what to do with the counterfeiters. So he is the only person who's allowed to prosecute them. Remember, he's the magistrate of the mint. He's the only one who can. And he ends up having to do it because no one else will. Because, like, that's his job. And he's going to suck it up, basically, for the Queen. And, like, Isaac Newton, he'd made a rod off his own back anyway because no warden before him had spent this much time in the mint. Like, he'd spent so much time there and he was, like, actively involved in it. Because no warden had, like, ever paid this much attention to it before. Like, that's what you had clerks for. They did all this stuff. But Newton's very hands-on. He's like, no, something ain't right here. And so he's at the very top of the situation and people are, like, terrified. They're convinced that the English economy is going to collapse. Like, there's going to be rioting in the streets. Houses are going to burn down. There's going to be looting. Like, everything's going to go to hell. But luckily, you've got Isaac Newton. And he shows up. He puts, like, all of this effort in. And he didn't want to deal with the counterfeiters. Like, he didn't want to have to do that because he thought he would end up getting, like, slandered. He thought they would, like, denounce him in his work. And he was so worried about that. But also, he thought he was too good for that too. So, like, it's double-edged blade. So, like, he feels like he doesn't want to have to deal with the sort of consequences or the response that he's going to get. But also, he feels like that's below my pay grade. But he is the only one who can do it, so it's not. Like, there's no one else. The Treasury's like, no, mate, it's up to you. Go figure it out. And he tries. So he goes out and he tries to investigate. Isaac Newton, crime fighter. I'm doing it for the mint. Man of the mint. And so he's trying to figure out, like, these guys. And he does not do well initially. Like, scientific method, you know, retry, hypothesis, off he goes. And, like, he doesn't know where to start because this is the 1690s. You know, it's the 17th century. If you don't know, like, Jeremiah, it's always Jeremiah. If you don't know Jeremiah Havisham, like, if you don't know who that is, like, then you don't know who that is. Like, you don't have IDs, you don't have passports, you don't have Facebook. You just kind of have to know them. Like, if you don't know them, then tough fucking luck. That's it. But he's going sort of, I don't even want to call it crime scene investigation because, like, you don't have fingerprints or any of that shit. And so he's living in, like, these tiny towns all his life. Like, he was in, like, Woolsthorpe and then he was in, like, Cambridge. And they're pretty small because you've only got, like, 5,000 people in Cambridge. And London has, like, 600,000 people. And so he's taking on the criminal underworld of London. Like, I don't want to call Isaac Newton a country bumpkin because that feels a bit mean. But also he's just from the countryside and he's gone from a wee village to fucking London. And they're like, maybe I shouldn't do this. But then Isaac Newton goes, fuck this for a game of soldiers. I gotta sort out the mint. And so he ends up dealing with a bunch of counterfeiters and he's going through the system. And you've got some people like William Shalloner who's just like sneaky, getting away with a lot of stuff. And he's trying to do this. Like, again, no police force, no investigators. Like, there isn't a police force, like, in London until, like, the 1820s. Like, because, you know, you've got another century and a bit to wait before this happens. But you could get, like, bounty hunters. Like, there was, like, a ye-old bounty hunter situation, and that was the law. Like, you'd have a sheriff in a town, maybe, but there wasn't, like, a force of any kind. You were just kind of lucky. You basically sent people out to places and checked if anything dodgy was happening. And if anything dodgy was happening, they would come back and report to you. Like that's it. Like a grapevine. Like, oh God, like in Game of Thrones with the little birds. Like, that's basically what that's like, right? And you would catch sort of criminals and you bring them in, they go get jailed and whatnot. And so Isaac Newton has to learn how to become a criminal investigator. And so he goes after every single counterfeiter he can. He's got a bunch of agents and they're all on his accounts, and he like pays them £5 like for one of his men to like chat with the counterfeiters. And like £5 back then is a lot of money. Like it's a huge amount. Like, you, for getting information, like anybody else who would have saw that happening would have thought that was batshit. They would have thought that is absolutely wild. And so he is paying like 1 month's wages for this one person to have a conversation with some counterfeiters. Like he is definitely investing in this investigation. But like, he doesn't just have agents go out and do it. Like, he goes to bars and taverns himself, but he does so in disguise to like try and find information on counterfeiters. And it works. And he ends up collecting like 27 of them, and he has them all hanged. Like, all of them. But like, Isaac Newton, he had been saying for years that the concept of money was not the value of it. Like, John Locke was like, it's the value of the silver. And he's like, no, it's symbolic, it's a commodity. Now, what had happened is when Isaac Newton had been in the recoinage situation, Newton was making sure these coins were perfect, right? So in the recoinage, he's like, these are going to have the right pH, everything's perfect. But over the next 10 years, those coins are basically gone anyway. So like, all that work was for nothing, right? But yeah, they're trying to figure out ways to sort of work up the money situation. And so they're issuing bonds, but not just like regular bonds. They also have like a lottery system going on. So like, if you buy like £10 of bonds, there's a possibility you'll win 1,000 back from the government. Yay! And so they're doing that. But they're also issuing bank notes, and they're also creating the check system. So the government at the time, they were like, no, you own what you own. And you just like, credit was a thing they couldn't grasp. And he's like, no, but it'll work because people will have credit and then you'll pay them back and it'll just help boost up the thing. And you know, it worked. So for all his work with the treasury and everything he was doing, like, he ends up being knighted in 1705. And when he gets knighted, he has to have a coat of arms. So becomes Sir Isaac Newton. And he has to get a coat of arms because he's knighted. And he decides, pirate. That's what my sigil's going to be. Pirates. It's crossbones on a black background. Like, of all the things, like, he's going to have heraldry, and he ends up putting his fucking sigil on everything, because of course he does. Like, he puts it everywhere. And that's his thing. Like, okay. Crossbones, white bones, black background. It's a fucking pirate flag, right? I'm just saying, like, that was a choice. Oh, and actually, 2 years before he's knighted, he becomes the president of the Royal Society. Now, so I once had someone tell me that because I was not a fellow of the Royal Society, that I wasn't a proper historian, even though, like, very few women are fellows in the Royal Society. Like, what a weird elitist take. But anyway, it was such a weird one. So yeah, he's in the Royal Society, he's being knighted, and his work is coming under question to his previous calculus work. And they're like, did this German guy invent it, or was it you? And they kind of came up with certain stuff around about the same time. Like, there is a term for it, I can't remember the exact term for it, but it's the reason we have two Dennis the Menaces, right? There's a Dennis the Menace in the US and a Dennis the Menace in the UK, and they were invented within months of each other, but they're like different. They weren't copies of each other. They just happened to have the same idea, like at the same time, which happens because, you know, we're not unique individuals. Sometimes someone else has an idea and someone writes it down first. That's all it is. And that's okay. Sometimes we build upon the ideas of others. Also okay. But don't steal shit, because that's a dick move. So, like, Isaac Newton doesn't live alone all of his life. He ends up moving in with his niece, well, half-niece technically, and her husband. So she ends up being like the stand-in, the lady who hosts for like all of his society events, because you're supposed to have a hostess, like you're supposed to have a woman do that. And so she ends up taking that role because she's like the only woman that he knows and the only woman feasibly that can do that because society and shit. So yeah. So he ends up living with them and he stays with them for the rest of his life. And as he gets older, he ends up like giving away sort of money and titles and deeds and anything he has. He kind of gives away a lot of it to relatives while he's still alive. And so when he passes away, he does so without a will, and then stuff just basically goes to his niece, Catherine Barton, and her husband, John Conduit. Like, so they basically go to them. And so Isaac Newton passes away on the 20th of March, 1727, or the 31st of March, 1727, depending on your calendar, in London at the grand old age of 83. Like, he had a good time of it, and he passed away in his sleep, which is probably the nicest death we've had in a long time, actually. So they ended up like getting a death mask for him, and they like took a bit of his hair and they tested it, and they're like, there's mercury in this. And you're like, no shit, Sherlock. He's a 17th century scientist who tried to turn base metals into gold. Of course there's going to be mercury in there somewhere. But it is what it is. So he ends up being buried in Westminster Abbey, and he is the first scientist to be buried there. Like, this is where the kings and queens go. But they're like, no, this man's important, and he goes in there. And yeah, a lot of his work shaped what we learn today. And he died, also, for the record, a virgin. But yeah, there you go. Now, as far as I know, like, this is me being a little bit sneaky and making assumptions. So I was reading between the lines of like what John Locke did, and I think the plan was to like get him to shag someone. Like, they were trying to set him up with a lady of the night, and he was just like, no. Because not only was he like not into, you know, that, but he was also very religious. And I think that's an easy cop out for a lot of people who are asexual in the past. Like, they could just go religion and it would be a good excuse for them to be abstinent, you know? Like, that's just my theory. But anyway, thus ends our story. If you liked, feel free to rate and review 5 stars. Say nice things. And also, vote for me. Don't forget, vote for me, British Podcast Awards, because it would be so funny. It'd be so funny. Now, of course, you can follow me on the socials. Now, I did wake up to 300 messages the other day, so I'm still trying to get through those. And I don't want to be rude to people, but 300's a lot. And that was the only ones that, as much as I could count. After that, I lost track. But yeah, hopefully things will be easier now. But it's recommendation time. And so I'm You know what? I'm not recommending it, but I'm going to make an honourable mention for Argyle. So I watched it, right? And it's a fun, silly movie. It has one problem, and that problem is it's too bloody long. Like, that's the problem with Argyle. If Argyle was like 30 minutes shorter, perfect movie. It'd be funny, it'd be silly, it'd be great. Anyway, for listening, I am going to recommend Gay Card Revoked. It's a podcast by two gay men, and you should listen to it because it's Pride and because I said so. Now for watching, I'm going to recommend Bullet Train for no other reason than it is an actually fun movie, because we all need a little bit of fun and lightness in our lives. And for reading, I'm going to recommend Tipping the Velvet. I just bought my 20th anniversary copy and I was like, 20th anniversary? No. But it's by Sarah Waters. It's fabulous. Go read it. It's amazing. And with that, I shall bid you good night. Adios. Au revoir. Auf Wiedersehen, my friends. Bye-bye.